The day has come. My Hero Academia is winding down. It's not ending just yet, but we are in the epilogue. The villains are dead, or imprisoned, and Class 1A has become Class 2A and are returning to UA High School. This raises the question, where do we go from here? Obviously, we're moving into the epilogue arc. You had your climax, you just don't end a story like this at the climax. Society needs to be rebuilt. I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about what happens after the epilogue. One path we can do is just have a hard ending and not do anything else after it. All that is off limits. We could always go to the past and fill out the gaps because we have plenty of them. It's like 8 generations since Quirks arose. Society collapsed after the introduction of Quirks. What exactly happened during that collapse, and what happened during the rise of All for One? The other option is doing a next generation story, whether it's 10 years in the future with the likes of Koda and Eri entering UA or whatever high school they choose to go to, or a little further down the line where Class 2A are now adults and have children of their own. And based on the thumbnail, you can guess that I'm a bit cautious about the idea of any next generation story happening. The biggest pitfall of any given next generation story is retreading old ground. This is especially bad when it comes to My Hero Academia. Why? Because My Hero Academia at its core is a story about the legacy of power. It's about All Might letting go of heroism and passing down his sacred torch to not only Midoriya, but since it's bad to have a single point of failure, pass down his duty to be the symbol of peace to the entire next generation of heroes. It's about one-for-all users passing down their power and the pain of power down in hopes of beating the Demon Lord himself. It's about how Endeavor's ambitions burned everyone around him, including his own children, some more literally than others. It's about All for One, the main villain of this story. As a man who refuses to be left behind, he doesn't want to pass anything down, he wants to consistently be in control. Even if it means hijacking his own apprentices and basically sons' body and soul in order to live forever and keep all his power. Doesn't get more of a legacy story than heroes are willing to pass down their powers and their struggles to the next generation, and villain refuses and always wants to be in control. Yeah, next generation story right there. Then there's the other effect. We all grew to like All Might and saw him only as a mentor figure. We saw Endeavor and how he develops from a monstrous human being who, even he acknowledges, was wrong, to a nuanced character that we reasonably can cheer for. Not to mention his children are representative of the fandom, whether to be apathetic towards him, to be rooting for him and wanting nice reconciliation, or just flat out still condemning him because his past actions are still awful in any context. We have seen Class 1A be the spotlight. It doesn't matter if the likes of, I guess Ojiro wasn't always the one front and center. It's still part of the problem of the two loci. The problem of the two loci goes like this. You as the audience already invested time, energy, and emotions into one generation. That's the point. On a fundamental level, a story needs you to be emotionally invested in it. It doesn't matter if it's Schadenfreude or masochism or genuinely feeling for these characters. It's perfectly natural to want to know more about what happened to the characters you so heavily invested in on an emotional level. It's why I find the idea of next generation stories, be it a film, a comic book, a movie, they're very difficult to write because you will end up struggling trying to make your next generation interesting because you don't want them to be a carbon copy of the last generation, but you don't want them to be so out of left field that it is just awkward to read and just say, oh, this is supposed to be a sequel. If you struggle to make your next generation interesting, or heaven forbid, the next generation is just plain unlikable, good luck getting an audience who will watch the next generation. Imagine a world where the children of Class 1A are so dull and boring that the only thing keeping them afloat is the name value of their parents. Imagine you ultimately end up caring more for what happened to Mineta. Yes, that Mineta, of all people, after the finale of My Hero Academia, all because the current cast of Class 1A is so dull, is so boring, is so unlikable, and the only thing keeping them afloat is whoever their parents are. That thought alone should disturb anyone who can read and listen and feel and have any of their five senses, or any of the senses that aren't the five senses. Among the many, many problems Digimon Adventure 02 had, one of the issues is that there were two sets of protagonists essentially, the 02 cast, who were the newcomers, and the original 8, two of which ended up being in the 02 cast because they were the youngest of the original 8. One of the issues that 02 had was they had two heads of story who didn't communicate or didn't get along. It changes based off who is telling the tale, but in general, it was frustrating to work with in the writer's room because they had two different visions, and of course, they had two different sets of characters, so that got very frustrating real fast, to the point that the 02 cast character development ended up getting blunted, and then it gets into this feedback loop of, okay, 02 is uninteresting, let's focus on the original 8. Oh boy, that was just a mess. 02 had a lot of issues that I could get into, but there was this whole, okay, the original 8 was a bit more interesting than the newcomers, which really shouldn't have been. But, well, let's just say the 02 newcomers got vindicated when Digimon Adventure Tri rolled around. You know, the follow-up to Digimon Adventure 02, where the original 8 ended up being so ineffective, so inconsiderate, so unlikable, so stupid, with skewed priorities left and right, that it ended up vindicating the newcomers. Everyone basically said, hey, Davis, Yoli, Cody, you're suddenly cool now. Ken's not counted here because he was already cool. As for you, Kari and TK, what the hell, man? What the hell? Yeah, you can see I do not like Digimon Adventure Tri at all. But anyways, it's an easy trap to fall into when writing next generation stories. You have the next generation be supporting pillars for the old generation. This concept isn't a bad thing in and of itself. In fact, My Hero Academia did this well with Endeavor and his children. It's a delicate balancing act. It's one thing to have the audience be pulled towards the old cast, it's another for the author to be pulled towards writing about the old cast. After all, if you are writing a story, it's a bit easier to build off the foundations of the old stories that you had already told versus build a whole new foundation with a whole new status quo for a new cast and build off of that. I am very sure that if we get a My Hero Academia Next Generation story, I want to know what on earth happened to the hellish Todoroki family. If we ever get a My Hero Academia Next Generation story, I want to know the fate of All Might. Is he dead because of old age? If so, what did his funeral look like? What did the rights to all his properties look like? Was that a legal nightmare? Okay, maybe I'm like one of the 4 people on Earth who actually cares about the legal aspects of this all, but All Might's pretty rich, so that money has to go somewhere. Probably Midoriya. If he's alive, what does his day-to-day activities look like, considering he was mangled pretty badly by All for One in the finale? In a Next Generation scenario, what happens to Aizawa? Because not only did he lose a leg and one of his eyes in this whole war, he also lost people. In the Paranormal Liberation War, he saw Nemuri, Midnight, die. Midnight is one of his classmates, mind you, from when he was at UA, and she became his co-worker. Does he have any regrets with her? In addition to the fact that he technically lost Oboro Shirakumo twice? What's present Mike like? Is he more jaded? Is he actually happy? Is he jaded but hides it under the veneer of being happy? Okay, so if we're doing the 10 years into the future bit, I don't worry about seeing much about Eri, mainly because she would be the focus, or at least be within the scope of the focus. But if we're going towards Class 1A or all adults and have kids thing, yeah, we're going to want to see a lot of things, like what was Eri's childhood after the war like? What was her schooling like? Did she become a hero? Did she become basically Recovery Girl 2.0? What on earth did she do in all that time? Kota and the rest of the traumatized kids Deku ended up saving fall into a similar boat. If it's around 10 years into the future, good for them, but if it's any further, we want to know what happened. Then there's the issue of creating the villain for this new saga. Hard to go anywhere when you punch out the Demon King and end him for good. I guess you could go after the nobility wanting to take the throne, but we kinda already did something like that with Overhaul and his Yakuza ambitions, and Shigaraki subjugating the Liberation Army and earning All for One's throne. Technically, it was a ploy to get him to be a new vessel, but still, we did the emotional plot beats. I guess you can have Earth open up to aliens, but that's a whole new can of worms that I'm not going to get into. But hey, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe I'm not creative enough to do a next generation story that doesn't fall into this pit trap, or maybe I have read way too many bad fanfics that involve basically falling into this trap to the point that I have been saturated and my view of next generation stories has been skewed. Maybe I'm just vastly underestimating Horikoshi or whatever writer comes next. Those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. If you have anything interesting to say it in the comments section. This is Cyril signing off.